I'm reading this book. My name is Asher Lev by the American author Chaim Potok. The ISBN number is 978-1-4000-3104-7. So Asher Lev is a Landover Hasid who keeps kosher, prays 3 times a day, and believes in the Rebono Shel Olam, the master of the universe. Asher Lev is an artist who is compulsively driven to render the world he sees and feels, even when it leads him to blasphemy. In this stirring and often visionary novel, Potok traces Asher's passage between these two identities, the one consecrated to God, the other subject only to the imagination. Asher Lev grows up in a cloistered Hasidic community in post-war Brooklyn, a world suffused by ritual and revolving round a charismatic rabbi. But in time, his gift threatens to estrange him from that world and the parents he adores. As it follows, his struggle, my name is Asher Lev, becomes a luminous portrait of the artist, by turns heartbreaking and exultant, a modern classic. So I'm reading from the back. So my name is Asher Lev, and these are the Anchor Books publishers. So book 1:1. My name is Asher Lev, the Asher Lev, about whom you have read in newspapers and magazines, about whom you talk too much at your dinner affairs and cocktail parties, the notorious and legendary Lev of the Brooklyn crucifixion. I'm an observant Jew. Yes, of course, observant Jews do not paint crucifixions. As a matter of fact, observant Jews do not paint at all in the way that I'm painting. So strong words are being written and spoken about me. Myths are being generated. I'm a traitor, an apostate, a self-hater, an inflictor of shame upon my family, my friends, my people. Also, I'm a mocker of ideas sacred to Christians, a blasphemous manipulator of modes and forms revered by Gentiles for 2,000 years. Well, I'm none of those things, and yet, in all honesty, I confess that my accusers are not altogether wrong. I'm indeed in some way all of those things. The fact is that gossip, rumors, myth-making, and news stories are not appropriate vehicles for the communication of nuances of truth. Those subtle tonalities that are often the truly crucial elements of a causal chain. So it is time for the defense for a long session in demythology, but I will not apologize. It is absurd to apologize for a mystery. And that is what it has been all along, a mystery of the sort theologians have in mind when they talk about concepts like wonder and awe. Certainly it began as a mystery, for nowhere in my family background was there any indication that I might have come into the world with a unique and disquieting gift. My father was able to trace his family line down through the centuries in the time of the Black Death in 1347. which destroyed about half the population of Europe. My father's great great grandfather was in his early years the manager of the vast estates of a carousing Russian nobleman who, when drunk, sometimes killed serfs. Once, in an act of wild drunkenness, he burned down a village and people died. You see how a Goe behaves. I would be told by my father and mother. The people of the Sitra or Accra behave this way. They are evil, and from the other side, Jews do not behave this way. My father's great great grandfather had transformed those estates into a source of immense wealth for his employer as well as himself. In his middle years, he began to travel. Why did he travel so much? I would ask. To do good deeds and bring the master of the universe into the world, my father would respond. To find people in need and to comfort and help them, my mother would say. I was told about him so often during my very early years that he began to appear quite frequently in my dreams. A man of mythic dimensions, tall, dark-bearded, powerful of mind and body, a brilliant entrepreneur, a beneficent supporter of academies of learning, a legendary traveler, an author of the Hebrew work, Journeys to Distant Lands. That great man would come to me in my dreams and echo my father's queries about the latest bare wall I had decorated and the sacred margins I had that day filled with drawings. It was no joy waking up after a dream about that man. He left a taste of thunder in my mouth. My father's father, the man whose name I bear, was a scholar and recluse in his early and middle years, a dweller in the study halls of synagogues and academies. He was never described to me, but I pictured him as slight of body and huge of head, with eyelids swollen from lack of sleep, face pale, lips dry, and the veins showing blue along his cheeks and temples. In his youth, he earned the name Eloui, genius, a term not lightly bestowed by the Jews of Eastern Europe. And by the time he was 20, he had come to be known as the genius of Mosir, after the Russian town in which he lived. Shortly before his 50th birthday, he abruptly and mysteriously left Mosir and with his wife and children journeyed to Ladov and became a member of the Russian Hasidic sect led by the Rebbe of Ladov. He began to travel throughout the Soviet Union as an emissary of the Rabbi. Why did he travel so much, I once asked. To bring the master of the universe into the world, my father said. To find people who needed help, my mother said. While on his way home from the Rebbe's synagogue late one Saturday night, he was killed by a drunken axe-wielding peasant. Somehow, my grandfather had forgotten it was the night before Easter. My mother came from a family of leading Sedi Gerer Hasidism, pious Jews who had been followers of the great Eastern Europe Hasidic dynasty established by Israel of Rezhin. On her father's side, my mother could trace her family back to the Rebbe of Berdyshev, one of the saintliest of Hasidic leaders. On her mother's side, the family line consisted of great scholars down to Chmielnicki massacres in 17th century Poland, where it vanished in blood and death. So little Asher Lev, born in 1943 to Rivke and Aryeh Lev in the section of Brooklyn known as Crown Heights, little Asher Lev was the juncture point of two significant family lines, the apex, as it were, of a triangle seminal with Jewish potentiality and frightened with Jewish responsibility, but he was also born with a gift. I have no recollection of when I began to use that gift, but I can remember at the age of 4 holding my pencil in the firm fist grip of a child and transferring the world around me to pieces of paper, margins of books, bare expanses of wall. I remember drawing the contours of the world, my narrow room with a bed, the paint-it-yourself bureau and desk and chair, the window overlooking the cemented backyard, apartment with its white walls and rug-covered floors and large framed picture of the Rebbe near the living room window, the wide street that was Brooklyn Parkway, 8 lanes of traffic, and red brick and white stone of the apartment houses, the neat cement squares of the sidewalks, the occasional potholes in the asphalt, the people of the street, bearded men, old women, gossiping on the benches beneath the trees, little boys in skull caps, the side girls, young wives in long-sleeved dresses and fancy wigs, all the married women of our group concealed their natural hair beneath wigs for reason of modesty. I grew up encrusted with lead and spectrumed with crayons. My dearest companions were Eberhard and Crayola. Washing for meals was a cosmic enterprise. I remember drawing my mother, born and raised in Crown Heights, her family high in the ranks of the Ladover aristocracy. She had gone through the Ladover school system for girls and had married my father 1 week after her graduation from high school. She was 19 when I was born and seemed more a sister to me than a mother. I remember my first drawings of my mother's face, longish, straight nose, clear brown eyes, high bone cheeks. She was small and slight. Her arms were thin and smooth-skinned, her fingers long and thin and delicately boned. Her face was smooth and smelled of soap. I loved her face next to mine when she listened to me recite the Kriyas Shema before I closed my eyes to go to sleep. I remember those early years of my life, those first years of my efforts with pens and pencils and crayons. They were very happy years. Laughter came easily both to me and to my mother. We played, we took long walks. She was a gentle big sister. I drew her walking with me along Brooklyn Parkway, her coat collar up around her chin, her cheeks flushed in a high autumn wind, 2 rounded spots of bright pink against the smooth fair skin of her face. In the winter I drew her tossing snowballs at the trees that lined the wide parkway, her arm motions like those of a little girl. Often we ran through the drifts together, kicking up the snow with our galoshes, and I drew that too. "Oh, how pretty," she said to me once, looking at a drawing of herself jumping over a snowbank. "Oh, I like this one. Asher, you made the snow very pretty and so high. What a jump. Did I jump like that? I'm almost flying." In the spring we sometimes went rowing in Prospect Park, not far from where we lived. She was an awkward rower, and she would laugh nervously whenever she fell backward off her seat from a skimming pull at the oars. But we went anyway, and often I took my crayons and pad with me and drew her as she rowed, and drew to the look of the water beneath the sky, and the surface movement stirred up her erratic oars. "Asher, it isn't nice to draw your mama like this." "But it was the time you fell in that boat, Mama." "It isn't nice, it isn't respectful. But the shore is very pretty. How did you do that?" "I use sand from the beach, Mama. Can you see the sand?" So this conversation goes on with his mom, and I'm reading from page 8 now. So she says, what are those she talks about the wet spots, Mama. When it's hot, they are the wet spots. After a moment, she said, well, why didn't you draw the pretty birds, Asha? And the flowers, Asha. Why didn't you draw the flowers? I mean, she's asking him to draw something pretty, sort of, and not just her. You know what? You just plunge into it. The first page itself takes you into the book. So it's a nice read. Good style. I mean, it's a racy style. Reading, and a book having all shades of human emotions. A good read. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'm reading a few lines from page 367. I came out of the Rebbe's office and walked past Rave, Dokoff's angry gaze and out of the building. I walked for hours, then beneath the naked trees of the parkway along streets that had once been my world but were now cold and gone from me. Sometimes during the walking I stopped in front of a mound of snow and with my finger drew in one continuous line the contour of my face. I shall live in snow on a cold Brooklyn Parkway. On a cold Brooklyn Parkway. I shall live a seed. I shall live painter. I looked at my right hand, the hand with which I painted. There was power in that hand, power to create and destroy, power to bring pleasure and pain, power to amuse and horrify. There was in that hand the demonic and the divine at one and the same time. The demonic and the divine were two aspects of the same force. Creation was demonic and divine. Creativity was demonic and divine. Art was demonic and divine. The solitary vision that put new eyes into gouged out sockets was demonic and divine. I was demonic and divine. Ashalev, son of Aryeh and Rivke Lev, was a child of the master of the universe, and the other side, Ashalev paints good pictures and hurts people he loves. Then be a great painter, Ashalev. That will be the only justification for all the pain you will cause. Be a great painter, I will cause pain again if I must. Then become a greater painter, but I will cause pain again. Then become a still greater painter, master of the universe. Will I live this way all the rest of my life? Yes, came the whisper from the branches of the trees. Now journey with me, my Asher, paint the anguish of all the world. Let people see the pain, but create your own molds and your own play of forms for the pain. We must give a balance to the universe. Yes, I said yes. My own play of forms for the pain. Later that afternoon, I called Anna at the gallery. It was another mob scene. She cried exultantly. I would have to see it to believe it. I told her I was returning to Europe. There was a long silence. I could hear the noise of the crowd through the telephone. Will you stay at the end of the show? She asked. I'm leaving tomorrow, Anna. Where will you go? I don't know. Back to Paris. I may go to Russia. She was very quiet. I need new faces, and there's the Hermitage in Leningrad and the Matisses in Moscow. Yes, she said. And then she said, you will let me know where you can be reached. Yes, goodbye, Ashalev. When you get to Paris, you should wear the beret. I said nothing. Goodbye, Ashalev. Good luck. I went to the kitchen and told my parents. My father stared at me and said nothing. My mother began to cry. I called and made a reservation of a flight to Paris. For the next flight, I remember nothing else about that day. I came awake in the night and heard my parents talking softly in the kitchen. I lay in my bed and wondered what they were saying. I woke in the morning and prayed. My parents were not home. I made myself breakfast. I wandered about the apartment and walked the streets. I had lunch alone in the apartment, and supper with my parents. I packed my bags. We stood in the door. My mother was crying. My father stood next to her, tall, heavy-shouldered, his eyes dark and moist. I thought. He said nothing, but he shook my hand. Bree's right, my mother said. You're right? She looked tiny and fragile. Have a safe journey, my Asha, she kept saying. Have a safe journey. I came out of the apartment house. It was cold and dark. I looked up. My parents stood framed in the living room window. I hailed a cab and climbed inside. It pulled slowly away from the curb. I turned in the seat and looked out the rear window of the cab. My parents were still watching me through a living room window. So, my name is Asha Love.